Hi. So this is Rayne back with another video here today talking about space aliens. I recently just watched a video posted by Tyler from Secure Team talking about the new signal that was discovered or picked up through the radio telescope over probably the same distance in the same sector of the sky that the WOW signal from the 70s was from. So this signal that repeats itself every decade or so, or a couple of decades or so, is just a radio signal. That doesn't mean anything. Um, Now, we know from at least doing some form of astronomy from any level of education, you can understand that radio signals are being emitted from planets and stars that are distant to us. Now, this also means that just because the planet or a star emits a radio signal does not mean it's an intelligent one. That just means it's emitting a radio signal or a radio carrier wave. So the wave itself that's being emitted from the planet or the star may not be from an intelligent source, but it might actually be repeating as a pulsar or a quasar for that matter. Those have really high concentrations of radio waves, and especially if one of the poles is pointed in our direction, we can receive interference from the waves themselves to give us at least a small portion of that radio signal that can be picked up by telescopes on Earth. Now, telescopes that use the radio frequency or RF frequency to pick up imagery from space are getting better and better all the time. So exponentially better as the years and decades progress. So understanding what's actually out there in space is one of the goals, I suppose, would be from any sort of astronomer. They would like to know what's actually out there, and they're trying to do that with radio telescopes. So as far as I can tell, this is not something that's going to be or even relatively close or similar to anything intelligent, quite possibly not. The likelihood of it being from an intelligent race is actually very slim. It's actually probably close to 2 or 3%. Of course, that's a large number in the grand scheme of things, but it's still a small percentage of what is actually possibly out there. Now, when I get to a more literal sense of what I'm going to talk about here in the next few moments is going to be a theory of mine that I hold very dear. And there are some very keen or kind of quasi-scientific theories that are possessed within some of the ways that aliens or an intelligent race other than humans would communicate with our planet. Now, being that as it may, the aliens themselves, the intelligent beings, would probably not communicate in a conventional manner that would be detectable by our technology. If we were to open our eyes up to see exactly what other ways we have to communicate, we would understand that light is the most efficient way for information to travel. Hence the reason we've moved to fiber optic cables, because light is definitely faster than RF signal, because the waves are shorter, they take longer to disperse in some ways. In some instances, passing through a medium can make them take longer to get to their target. And because of the vacuum of space or supposed vacuum of space, that means the radio waves will travel farther, which is actually not the case, because the carrier signal does not interact hardly at all with the air around us. It does interact with some of the molecular structure of the air, but the density of the atmosphere does slow down certain waves at certain frequencies. But radio waves travel along the ground at a faster pace than they do in space, because the pressure and the magnetic field of the planet does help and aid this wave to be carried out throughout our atmosphere, and which is why radio is so functional on our planet. In space, however, light is the fastest way to travel. So any information that an alien race would hope to give us, or, at least a hello or something like that, or say hi to us every once in a while, they would do that using light. They would do that using laser beams or lights in a certain fashion that could carry information or data to us that we would receive as a form of information. We could break down that light and decode the information contained within it, similar to what would be proposed as a transporter beam from Star Trek. It's very similar. light is actually more capable than carrying a ton more data than any radio wave would ever be able to, especially at frequency dilations. And when you achieve resonance with radio waves, they cease to carry the data that they were carrying before because they have to pass through objects that may or may not be as dense as the area around it surrounding it when the data was added to the carrier signal. Now, understanding that light is different from radio waves, light can also carry a direct path, but it also acts as a wave and a particle. So understanding that light has two functions or two possible functions in the realm of carrying data from one point to another, it stands to reason to concentrate it into a tube or into some sort of wire casing, hence fiber optic cables, would be more efficient at carrying the light information down a line to a destination from origin. So the real concept is, if there is any intelligent life in space that's not on this planet, then it would stand to reason to think that maybe it's possible they could use some sort of light technology to send a beam to our planet or wherever they could aim it to, that would carry data based on their technology and their information. So whatever they want to say, they'd say salutations or whatever, we come in peace, or we're in this part of the sky. They would send that signal over a light beam, and it would take seconds to get here. Well, still light years, but it would take seconds to get here in the sense that it was sent light years ago. It would still take that long for the light beam to travel. If the planet was, say, 100 million light years from here, which is a huge number, it would take 100 million years for that information to get here from point of origin. So it's still not very efficient as far as the way to travel based on distance, but depending on how close they are, we could receive a signal from in the form of a light beam or in the form of a radiation beam similar to light that would travel to our planet from the host origin planet, that would give us some sort of inclination as to whether or not there's intelligent life in space. I, however, disagree. I don't think there's anything out there, simply because whatever was out there is either long gone or they avoid the mess out of us because we are such a chaotic race of beings. We're different, all of us are, but we are the same species. We carry the similar genetic traits between all races of humanity, but there are separate races and factions that do separate us from, say, Indian, African American, Anglo, Mongoloid. Those are definitely differences in species, as variations or variants in race. And when you think of how a a faction would be set up, you understand that there's possibilities that we could have been brought here by intelligent species long, long ago that could not stop warring with themselves, similar to how we're doing today. But they were doing this warring and battling in space. So we see evidence of that occurring throughout our history and ancient history, especially in India. It's very well documented in India, in the Bhagavad Gita and the Vedic texts. They do carry a lot of information about wars in the sky between the gods, or who they viewed as their gods at that time. So, I mean, they still view them as their gods today, but still, that was a long time ago, and, well, eons ago. But this war was fought over the course of millennia. And they fought this war in space. Now, because they weren't from here, doesn't make them not human. Now, the theory that I have, that I'm working with, that I'm talking about, is the theory of Tiamat. And if you're familiar with any of that, you know that Tiamat was a planet that was probably, I'd say, roughly a quarter the size of Jupiter or Saturn, a large Class M planet, the same as our Earth. That actually, when the planet was destroyed from this battle, the remnant of the planet, which became the Earth, was then formed and molded by the Supreme Being that said he would never destroy the Earth again, and created the new Eden, and which is where we are now. Ergo, the translation of Earth from English to a different, I forget what language it is it's translated to, but it translates loosely to planet of the children or the young ones, which is what we are. We are a planet of children of the ancestry that used to live and go to and from in space or the heavens. Now, I'm not saying that we're directly related to the Anunnaki, but we do have ties similar to their existence and the reason for our existence is predicated on that discovery, especially if you learn anything about Sumeria and ancient Mesopotamia. There are very, very heavy documented series of events that do carry a lot of questionable data that talks about humanity in space, or descendants of humanity, modern man. We ourselves are greatly diminished in our physicality. We were diminished to a point where we live shorter days. We have less intelligence than we used to. We're not connected to the spiritual world the way in which we were intended to communicate with God. We were not allowed to communicate anymore. Now, the reason I say that is the reason we're in this position now, is because the only evil that ever exists between anyone is depicted by man or depicted by humans. So the only evil that would stand to reason to even come in contact with us would be our own doing. So, and God has pretty much very well maintained that he will not interlope with free will. So he will not usurp our free will and our sovereign soul, because we were given this place as a reconstituted form of Eden, a smaller planet, much smaller than Tiamat, but we maintain most of our oceans and a small parcel of land that was left over from the existence of the previous world. Now, if you want further evidence on that, do some research on the Devil's Tower. That's an old tree stump. It's a very large, large place, but it is a petrified, fossilized tree. Now, the reason I'm saying that this is one of the biggest turns of events in evidentiary history that we could find is because there's not a very huge amount of information carried about this. But the more research I do, the more books I look into, and the more I visit areas like that, especially when I'm noodling around on Google Earth. I've been to Devil's Tower before, but not physically. So looking at it through the Google Earth viewer and also through old pictures and books and things that are around 70 to 100 years old, depending on what library you go to, you can find pictures of this place in its entirety at its aged course in human history around the 1940s to 1950s. Mid to late, I would say, in that era of time. And the pictures do show the Devil's Tower quite opulently in some of the black and white photos. And it is obviously not a natural mountain. When you look at mountains and understand what they are breaks or cracks in the tectonic plates that push up parts of the sediment into the air, causing a wrinkle on the tectonic plate, which makes a mountain range come to pass. Now, understanding how mountains are formed and knowing how mountains are made, this goes against all of those rules in geology. The Devil's Tower goes against every single rule in geology I have come to know. Now, through my research, I've understood this could also have been an ancient caldera lava vent that has come to the surface from far below, that has been pushed up or revealed from massive oceanic waters that once ran over the surface during a great flood of the ancient past, and maybe even glacier removal of sediment from around the mountain itself would lend this to be a possibility. So there aren't too many solid theories on what this actually is, but when I look at it, it looks like a tree. It looks like a tree stump. There are several mountains around the world that do seem to be really exorbitantly large tree stumps. Now, the reason I say these are large tree stumps is because when you think about how large the planet used to be, erring on the side of Tiamat, roughly 1/3 the size of Saturn, it would stand to your logic to look at that tree stump area of the Devil's Tower, an example, as being a normal tree for the size of the planet that did exist thousands of years ago, when our atmosphere was 90% oxygen or above that, whatever. We had a very hazy atmosphere. You could hardly see 10 miles. I would even suggest that maybe 5 miles would be the most distant you could see because of the thickness of the oxygenation in our atmosphere. Now, all of our history has shown that 90% of all of the species on the planet that once existed is now gone. Now, follow along with me here for just a little bit longer. I want to point out a little bit more of this evidence that I choose to give you. Now, the reason that this area of land that we live on, all the continents that we have gathered ourselves around, and they're separated now still, but the continents that we live upon, if you run them back together, they all fit like a piece of puzzle, okay? They all fit together like puzzle pieces. They run back together. Now, people will say and argue with you that it is tectonic plates that cause this, and tectonics that cause the separation of the plates to move away and form continents and surround themselves by water. And that is true. This partially a partial theory that goes along with this that I'm also going to contend is also factual. Now, when you look at the Earth itself, when you run all the continents back, there is a line of sutures that go around on the ocean floor called the mid-oceanic rift. Now, where this is located, it looks like it was put together like a seam of a baseball. Okay, now the stitching is sort of like the bone sutures that grow together in your bones. So humanity has very interesting ways in which the bones or the sutures in your skull come together and interlock like fingers like this. Now, the same thing can be seen and witnessed on the ocean floor all the way around the planet. So it is my theory and my contention that where Tiamat was destroyed, the remnants of the Earth that could be saved was molded back together in a cylindrical form or spherical form, similar to the way that accretion makes a clump of matter in space reform back into a solid spherical body of a planetoid or a planetesimal or another rocky body or a large meteor or meteorite, whatever you want to call it, or a large moon or planet. You know, those things are formed in that manner in space, so the theory would contend. But they are still theories. I still believe that the Earth itself was created from the remnants of that, and this is the remaining part of Tiamat that was formed, and the land that was saved was where the original Garden of Eden was located. Hence the reason we have Africa, and then they refer to that commonly as the cradle of life. Now, the Garden of Eden was present there eons ago. Now, where we are living today are the remnants of the old garden that were reformed to reconstitute human life to its current state. Now, the reason humanity was so much larger than before was, again, because of the oxygenation of the atmosphere and how much larger the planet was. Now, the reason I can say that theory is factual, or you can actually conceive this into being real or actual, talk about it being a legitimate theory, is because if you study anything about evolution and you learn about an island in, I think it was Papua New Guinea, that has these animals that are normally grand, large species that are actually very tiny on this one little island. Elephants that are the size of small dogs. Certain animals like anteaters that are the size of rats, or there's tigers that are the size of cats, or domestic cats. Lions that are the size of domestic cats, and horses that are smaller. Now, I say this because the landmass that we live upon now is substantially smaller than it used to be. The Earth itself that was formed post-destruction of Tiamat is way smaller than it used to be, way smaller. And we ourselves are living in the reformed, reconstituted garden that God had created for us all those eons ago. The Earth itself that we live upon now may only be 6,000 years old, but that is the duration of time for the relative expansion of humanity to come into pass. So go back 6,000 years and tell me how much history you can find documented clearly that shows that our existence had been uninterrupted. You're not going to find it. Now, the reason I say you're not going to find it is because the land that was here, that was exposed to the space or whatever, Antarctica typically, was flash frozen. The atmosphere was ripped away and most of it was flash frozen. Now, the reason I say this was one of those working theories is because there's animals that live there that were in this tropical lush environment when Tiamat was still in its full swing of its seasonal, whatever, perfect world, with no seasons, no cold, no hot, just perfect temperate climate that existed on Tiamat and has been proven that it existed thousands and thousands of years ago. I would say pre-Young Dryas era. And we're going to go to the Pleistocene and look to this, or the Holocene, not Pleistocene, but the Holocene era, where most of these animals are from. Now, if you look at how they were flash frozen, they still have food in their gut that is still not digested, that is flash frozen, preserved as it was the day it was eaten. And these plants are all extinct. So that lends further evidence that this animal was living and breathing, kicking and screaming, whatever, right around the time that this occurred all those years ago. Now, we don't know how to carbon date things within an accurate level. And if you say that you can carbon date things within 100% factual accuracy, you're wrong, just flat wrong, because carbon dating has been proven to be remarkably inaccurate. And the reason that you can't get an accurate depiction or direction as to how long something's been around or how old it is based off its carbon radio date or its radioactive decay level is because if something is frozen, its decay rate is stopped, which means you can't determine its age. You can determine its age, but up until the point at which it died or when it was frozen, which was frozen live, possibly, and then they were frozen to death instantly from being exposed to the deep cold of space without an atmosphere. Now, the only way this would occur is if wormwood or the planet Nibiru that people often talk about ran through our realm of orbit and struck the Earth thousands of years ago. I'd say during the Holocene or prior. When they talk about the molten Earth or newly formed Earth, I would say that was post-apocalyptic and post-Armageddon, that the new Eden was formed. God moved upon this place and created a new place for us, smaller, much more defined into a smaller orbit, and it is reckless. We do have a little of a wobble to us that does create seasons and variations in seasonal acuity in our planet. And we also have a precession that slowly turns the poles to one side or the other, that does create a false sense of temperacy in certain areas and another false sense of ice ages that do occur relatively in a cyclical function. Now, we are overdue for an ice age currently, but the reason it's being forestalled is because of the sun's active behavior. The sun itself is not an extinguishable body, okay? The portion at which of the sky that they're talking about that stars can go supernova, the stars that do this are, well, suspected to be quite large, way more immensely larger than our sun, just incredibly immensely larger. That our sun itself will not, in fact, go to a red giant stage. It will fizzle out and turn to a white dwarf because it is a dwarf star. Now, when you understand what occurred to our planet hundreds of thousands of years ago, if you want to go that far back, I'd say it goes further back than that, and our numbers are probably not that accurate, but it's a good guesstimation to say probably hundreds of thousands of years prior to the Pleistocene or Holocene. I would say probably closer to 1 million to 3 million years ago, maybe 4, that we can get a guesstimated age of our planet being about that old. I don't say that's accurate. I say it's probably closer to 6,000 or 7,000 years in its current form. But the Earth is much older than that. Parts of it are anyway. And the parts that they've discovered are many times older than the portions of it that are exposed that we walk upon today. There are portions of the Earth that are hundreds and millions of years older than what we could see on the surface. Now, the remnants of civilizations that exist here now, or the ancient civilizations that existed thousands of years ago, may have been lots and lots older than we have ever thought them to be, because they might have been the very last civilization of humanity on the planet Tiamat before it was destroyed by an impact from Nibiru or wormwood. It is also my theory and my contention that wormwood itself, or Nibiru, one of the planets that wormwood or whatever that people talk about, was actually destroyed in the impact previous, when Tiamat was destroyed. It would stand to reason that that is probably why we have our moon where it is and how we have it, because it stabilized our planet. If we didn't have the moon, things would be a lot more rough here. The moon itself keeps the Earth tame in its orbit and its rotation. It does not cause damage to the surface of the Earth like people contend it does. It is part of the reason that we have seasons and tides and all that, and our newy or ancient culture we call New Age now. I mean, it is technically newer than most of the older spiritualities, but it is not new. There's nothing new underneath the sun, folks. So my theory that I can finally back out of it now and tell you the end of it here is that where we are currently is the newly formed earth that was promised us by God as in the second Eden. The reason people can't nail down a time for when Megiddo should occur is because it is not going to. It's already happened. We are here as a remnant of the ancient civilization. We're living on our own little world, secluded from the rest of the universe, and we will not interact with any intelligent race in space because it's just not going to occur. Now, the reason I say it's not going to occur is because there's no one out there but you and me. No one out there. And furthermore, NASA is one of the biggest companies, or biggest corporations, I should say, groups of people to cover all this information up. Why are they so interested in Antarctica? Because they found evidence of what I'm saying is true. There is a remnant of the old time still living there, probably an old giant, Nephilim, something like that, a fallen angel that hasn't died. Or they found a way to reanimate this person to bring them back to life from their frozen slumber, to talk to them about what the hell's going on here. But I'm telling you, this is what I have seen in my dreams. This is also what I have come across in certain evidentiary findings, along with a lot of old newspapers and research articles that I've been able to drum up. Now, if you go to any library, any public library, and look up theories on Gaia, on Tiamat, on, let's see, Proto-Earth, and also Ancient Man, let's see, there's a lot of good resources out there, and I've gotten information from all the sources. But this theory that I'm contending is an amalgamy of all of those theories put together. Now, when I did the research and brought all of this together is when things clicked for me. So the way I'm talking about it, the way I'm stating things here has not been done, or at least I haven't heard it. Now, if I am wrong and someone else has the same theory that I do, then please leave a comment in the sections or comment in the comment section below, like and subscribe for more of these videos like this, and I will share more of my theories with you in the future. Which is another reason I want to say to you all that God has no intention of destroying this place, okay? He would not do that again. He said he would never do it again, and he's not lying. He loves you. Why would he destroy something that he loves so much? And for those of you who have questions about this here, look at that. You think that's satanic? Okay, turn it upside down. That's satanic. This is a unity symbol, the 5 elements. Okay, so just want to make that clear. I'm not satanic. I'm not even Christian, but I am spiritual, and I believe in God, and I know he exists. That the existence of my Father, the existence of my Lord and my King is an ancient one. And there's only one good Nephilim that I could ever occur or ever come along to agree with throughout history. There's only been one, at least that I can contend with, that was remotely good or even cared about humanity in any shape, way, fashion, or form more than to eat us because we were smaller than they were. And that I'm referring to is Thoth, the ancient Atlantean king, the thrice-born Hermes Trismegistus. I know I said thrice-born, or, Trismegistus is also thrice-born, but you know what I'm saying. It's Hermes. In his final iteration, he was an ancient Atlantean king, also related to the Nephilim, half human, half deified creation, well, demigod, I would say, uh, really astute in the powers of magic science or alchemy, and knew how to speak things into fruition, as in live prayer, moving things beyond any comprehension we could ever imagine, because we've lost this ability. Now, there are some of you out there who are going to disagree with me. You don't have to agree with me. I'm not saying these things because I'm expecting you to be on my side. I know they're true. I don't have a doubt in my heart. I know because God has shown me that through my dreams and through my interactions with the spiritual world in my meditations. Now, when I say meditations, I mean prayer. I mean spoken alchemy. I mean calling into fruition. Using your words to command things into being is what God did when he created the earth. We have the same power. We are made in his image. We are the stewards of this planet. We were given this place as a gift, not as a prison sentence. So the evil ones would intend to get you to believe that it is a prison. And they do imprison us. They enslave us all. But it is up to you. The reason free will still exists is because God knows you can exercise free will very easily. And if you choose to disembark from the evils in your life, then they will come after you. That's just the nature of the beast. And you know what I'm talking about. The absolution of humanity is grace. The only way out of this place is through the acceptance of your power as being a child of the Creator and a beloved creation that he is never going to destroy again, not in the way that he has previously. So, as I have explained a little bit here, probably went too much into my theory, I just want you all to know that this is not something that I'm going to start preaching from a street corner, because it doesn't matter if you believe me or not. I have very strong feelings that this is actually true. And there are some good points in history that show that this is most likely factual, 90% of it. And the other 10% that remains unanswered is only because I can't figure out, at least not to the best of my abilities, I can't figure out why on earth, why in the world these beings that were here all that long time ago haven't come back, or what they're waiting for. Why are they waiting to return for so long? What are we waiting on? That's just the other end of the theory. We have to wait for solidification. We have to wait for solidarity. We have to wait for them to come back and say, hey, this is how it really is. And we've been here before. And you are our children or our slaves. Whoever comes, is going to call us a slave or their children. I can say the deception is still coming, but the madness is soon to end, because once they arrive, the others also do. And this will be over. There won't be any more suffering on this world, because they are getting tired of seeing it. Evil cannot prevail forever. And the reason that it does, I want to elaborate on this a little more. The reason that it still exists today is because it's free will. You have free will. You possess it. It is your job, your choice, to die to your free will, die to yourself every day, and give in to God's will. That is the charge for you. You still have two guardian angels with you at all times. They never leave your side. So the only person that can allow evil into this world, I'm looking right at you, that is you. Each and every single one of you. You can feed the good dog or the bad dog. It is your choice. But that is free will in the nature of it. If you wish to lead a peaceful life, then you need to feed the good dog and let the bad one die, because evil only begets evil. Thank you. Please like and subscribe.